Good afternoon to all our brothers and sisters and friends.
兄弟姐妹、弟兄姐妹，还有慕道朋友们，午安。
So today I'd like to continue our study of the study of 1 Samuel.
今天下午想继续跟大家来学习撒母耳记上。
In my previous sermon, we just looked at 1 Samuel chapter 18.
那在之前，我们在这里分享了撒母耳记上的第18章。
And we examined this chapter through the perspective of David.
那我们查考第18章的时候呢，我们是以大卫的角度来看这件事情。
And we looked at how David used wisdom to build up his status within the Israelites.
那我们看到大卫怎么样用智慧在以色列国来建立自己。
The Bible described David as acting very wisely in leading his men and fighting his battles.
那圣经上我们也看到说，大卫怎么样用智慧来带领神的百姓，然后来这个出征。
And as a result, he gained the favor of his men.
那因为这样子所以大卫在以色列百姓里面呢，他也很多人跟随他，他也建立了他自己的名声。
Then we studied what is wisdom.
所以我们查考了什么是智慧。
And we learned that it has certain characters and virtues, and it was used to promote justice.
那我们从查考里面，我们得知说，智慧是带着智慧里面带着有一部分的公义。
And finally, we learned that wisdom came from God, and that He's very willing to distribute that very freely.
那我们也学习到说，这个智慧是来自于神，那神也愿意把这个智慧分给所追求的人。
So today we'd like to study the second main character in this chapter, Saul.
那今天要来查考第18章里面的第二个主角，那就是扫罗王。
And we're going to study how Saul's heart got corrupted by his jealousy.
那我们要来查考说，扫罗的心是怎么样被妒忌给败坏的。
And we will study how the results and the actions he took because of his jealousy led to his further decline.
那我们会来查考说，因为妒忌的关系，使扫罗王在选择上面做错了选择，使他继续不断的去败坏，去腐烂。
So let's turn to 1 Samuel chapter 18.
所以我们来翻开撒母耳记上的第18章。
1 Samuel chapter 18.
撒母耳记上的第18章。
So this chapter begins where after David defeated Goliath.
那第18章这里是记载说是这个大卫打胜歌利亚事后的事情。
And now Saul has given him charge over a small part of the Israelite army.
那所以扫罗呢就把这个有一部分小小的军权交在大卫的手里。
And David went out to battle and fought the Philistines and won many victories.
那大卫呢就带着他的兵跟非利士人去征战，然后赢了就打胜了。
Let's read verse 5 through 9.
那我们来读第5节到第9节。
Verse 5. So David went out wherever Saul sent him and behaved wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servant. Verse 6.
第6节。
Now it happened, as they were coming home, when David had returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, that the women had come out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. So the women sang as they danced and said,
第7节。
Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Then Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul eyed David from that day
第9
forward.
节。
So here the Bible describes an event, the event that started Saul's hatred for David.
在这里记载这个一个事迹，那就是说扫罗是如何对大卫起了妒忌的心。
So after coming back from battle, a victorious battle against the Philistines, the women of Israel came out and sang praises for David.
所以当他们打胜这个非利士人歌利亚的时候，当他们回归的时候，这以色列的妇女们 他们歌颂了大卫。
And they praised David for killing 10 times more Philistines than Saul.
他们歌颂大卫说，大卫杀死了万万。
Now, when Saul heard this, of course, naturally he became very upset.
所以当大卫听到这首谣歌的时候呢，他就非常的愤怒。
And I think that's very understandable. I think any one of us in that situation would feel the same.
或许这是可以理解的，因为换在任何人的角度，我们或许也会有同样的感受。
However, Saul internalized this, what the women were saying, how he is feeling, and felt very threatened by David.
但是扫罗王因此把这件事情放在了心里，然后认为说大卫对他的王位造成了威胁。
And the unfortunate thing is that there's how Saul behaved after what the women said was what caused him to further act badly in the future and cause his decline.
那因为妇女的这样子歌颂，使扫罗对于大卫产生了妒忌，然后使他事后有不断的不断的在这个选择上做错了选择，走下坡。
So let's examine what the woman has said.
那我们来看这些妇女歌唱了什么。
So they said that David killed 10,000 and Saul killed 1,000.
在这里，在这个第7节这边说，扫罗杀死了千千，大卫杀死了万万。
So I think there's two ways of looking at this.
所以当我们来看这节的时候呢，可以从2个角度来看。
So it couldn't be just looking at from this immediate battle.
那我们可以看的就是这个刚刚所发生的这场战争，
Where David could possibly have killed more men than Saul did.
那就是大卫在战场上，他真的杀死了比扫罗杀死非利士人杀的还要多。
So maybe, but we have to ask the question: Did David really kill 10 times more men, 10,000 men, and Saul only killed 1,000 men?
所以我们要问的是否大卫真的在战场上面真的杀死有这个万的非利士人，而扫罗只杀死了1000位的非利士人。
To me, that sounds very unreasonable. I find it very difficult to believe that one person can kill so many people.
所以如果这样子来说的话，很难想象说一个人有办法杀死1万人。
So if you look at what the woman said, if you interpret it that way, it didn't make much sense.
所以当我们这样子来解读的话呢，我们就很难去想象说这件事情是真的。
Or we can look at it from the sense that maybe the women are scribing over a longer period of time during the entire career of being a soldier.
那或许这些妇女所歌唱的是他们在他们的军中的职业生涯，他们所杀的人。
So did David in terms of all the people who killed, did he kill 10 times more enemies than Saul?
真的，大卫是比扫罗杀的敌人高出10倍来吗？
And that seems very unreasonable as well, because Saul was older than David, and he fought more battles than David.
那我们也知道说扫罗比大卫还要年长，那他征战的次数也比大卫还多。
And if you look in the previous chapters, you saw that Saul was actually a great fighter and a great leader.
那如果我们从之前的经文来看，我们知道说扫罗他也是很能征战的。
And he led the Israelites into many great victories against the enemies of Israel, like the Ammonites, the Amalekites.
那扫罗他也带领以色列人打胜很多战争，例如说亚玛利亚人。
So it's reasonable to assume that over Saul's entire career that he was a more effective soldier and more defeated more enemies than David.
所以呢，如果从这个角度来看的话，那就是说扫罗他身为一个兵，在军事里面做服侍，他杀的比大卫还多。
So if we look at this just from the literal, what the women said, it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense that Saul should be so upset, because Saul did a lot of great things.
所以从字面上来看，真的是没有办法去理解说为什么扫罗会如此这么生气。
That Saul himself was contributed a lot to the Israelites.
因为扫罗的确对于以色列国有非常大的贡献。
So why was Saul really upset by this?
那扫罗为什么这么愤怒呢？
So what the women were saying, what they really represented was that for the Israelites, they have begun to favor David over Saul.
那扫罗愤怒的原因是因为以色列人他们表现出他们喜悦大卫胜过于喜悦扫罗。
That now David has become the new hero, the new star in Israel.
这个很像说大卫是这个国家的一颗明亮的一个盼望，明亮的一个星。
So the number that the women was singing did not represent an actual literal number, but rather it is a reflection of their favor and their favor for David versus Saul.
所以当这些妇女在歌唱的时候，他们这些这个数目未必正确，但是他们表达的意思就是他们喜悦大卫胜过于喜悦扫罗。
So how did Saul responded to these women?
所以对于这些妇女的歌唱，这个扫罗他是怎么样回
So
应的呢？
let's read verse 8.
我们来看第8节。
Then Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him, and he said, so he was very angry. And then verse 9.
在这里第8节说扫罗他愤怒，那第9节
Verse 9. So Saul eyed David from that day forward.
所以从那第9节，从那日起，扫罗就怒视大卫。
And the word eyed, it means to look.
那这个怒视，它就是说用眼睛去看。
But not just to look as in literal to see, but to look at someone very enviously, with a lot of jealousy.
那这个看不是普通的看，而是带着嫉妒的眼光去看。
So mainly that Saul became jealous of David.
所以扫罗带着他嫉妒大卫。
So we can see that Saul's anger came because he has because David has won the favor of the people.
所以我们可以看到说扫罗妒忌大卫，是因为大卫得到以色列百姓的喜悦。
And David by taking that away, Saul had nothing left except his throne.
那所以呢，当这个人民的喜悦被大卫抢走的时候呢，扫罗唯一剩下的就是他的王位而已。
And now Saul became very afraid because he was concerned that David was going to take that away as well. And as a result, Saul would be left with nothing.
所以扫罗他就害怕说，事后大卫连王位都会去夺去，那他什么都没有剩下了。
And so now, so Saul's jealousy led Saul to feel that he was very angry and threatened.
所以呢，因为扫罗的妒忌使他产生了恐惧。
But then these emotions led Saul to start to act.
所以这些恐惧带来给扫罗很多的后面的一些他有后面很多的行为来表现他的恐惧。
Let's turn to verse 10 and 11.
我们来看第10节、第11节。
Verse 10.
第10节。
And it happened on the next day that the distressing spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied inside the house. So David played music with his hands, as at other times, but there was a spear in Saul's hand. Verse 11. And Saul cast the spear, for he said, I will pin David to the wall. But David escaped his presence twice. So here we see that how Saul acted.
所以在这里我们可以看到这个扫罗的行为。
So Saul tried to kill David directly.
扫罗一开始就直接想把大卫给刺透。
He took a spear and threw it at David, in hoping to pin him to the wall.
他想说把大卫给钉在这个墙上。
And when that failed, Saul became afraid.
所以当这个扫罗的行为失败的时候，他就开始产生了恐惧。
Because he saw God was with David.
他看到说神与大卫同在。
So Saul came up with another scheme, and this time was to kill David indirectly.
所以呢，扫罗事后呢，他事后他又想说要怎么样，间接的来杀大卫。
So let's read verse 17.
那我们来看第17节，
Verse 17.
第17节。
Then Saul said to David, Here is my older daughter Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, Let not my hands be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him.
第17节，扫罗对大卫说：“我将大女儿米拉给你为妻，只要你为我，奋勇为主征战。”扫罗心里说：“我不好亲手杀他，要借非利士人的手害他。”
So here, his scheme was to get David to marry one of his daughters, marry one of his daughters.
所以扫罗的计划就是让大卫来娶他的女儿。
So first, Saul offered his eldest daughter to David, but David declined because he felt that he was unworthy.
那一开始大卫他拒绝，因为他认为说他不配。
And then Saul offered his youngest daughter, and David accepted after encouragement from Saul's servants.
那事后扫罗又把他最小的女儿许配了给大卫。
But behind those good intentions was actually Saul's scheming.
但是在这一切的后面的安排，那就是这个扫罗王他在要想尽办法杀死大卫。
Because what Saul asked of David for his daughter's hand was that he would go and kill more Philistines.
因为这个娶他女儿的代价就是要奋勇上场去杀更多的非利士人。
To earn the hand of Saul's youngest daughter, Saul asked David to kill 100 Philistines.
所以呢，为了娶这个扫罗的最小的女儿，大卫要杀100个非利士人。
And Saul hoped that during this battle, the Philistines would kill David.
所以扫罗希望说，在这些战争当中，大卫会死在非利士人之手。
But ironically, though, despite Saul's scheming, David was victorious in battle.
但是虽然扫罗是这样的计划，但是神保守大卫。
And these victories boosted David's reputation within Israel.
反而这些胜利当中，使大卫的名声更加的声望，
and caused further decline of Saul's.
使扫罗的名声继续不断的变小。
So we saw at the end, all of Saul's scheming actually led to Saul's further decline.
所以你可以看到扫罗所做的、所安排的这一切，反而没有成功，那使大卫的名声一直升高。
So when we look at Saul's jealousy, you saw how the jealousy ate at Saul.
所以我们可以看到说，扫罗的妒忌真的是成为他的针对扫罗。
So it's just like what we've just read. Turn to Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30.
那我们看回《申命记》第14章第30节。
Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30.
申命记第14章第30节。箴言第14章第30节。
Chapter 14, verse 30.
箴言第14章第30节。
A sound heart is life to the body, but envy is rottenness to the bones.
第30节，心中安静是肉体的生命，嫉妒是骨中的朽烂。
So we see how Saul's enviness, his jealousy, rotted himself.
我们可以看到，真的在扫罗的例子上，因为他的妒忌，使他的人开始朽烂。
It destroyed his peace and his kingship.
他毁掉了他心里面的平安，也毁掉他的王位。
His jealousy caused him to be so angry and threatened by David that he wanted to kill David.
因为他的妒忌，他想要杀大卫。
and that led to his and which led to in which led Saul to attempt to murder David.
那所以他数次的想要把大卫给除掉。
So we can see how this jealousy decreased the peace in his mind, which led to him to reduce his ability to make judgments, and led to him leading to his further decline in Israel.
所以我们可以看到扫罗因为妒忌的关系，毁掉他心里面的平安，使他在做选择上面没有办法做一个正确的选择。
So we see jealousy is something that's very common.
而我们今天来看，这个妒忌是一个很普遍的东西。
And that we can see that I'm sure we all have suffered from it.
那我相信我们大家或许曾经都被妒忌
And if we look
给
at
打扰过。
and we look at where our jealousy stems from, is usually it comes from a desire and insecurity.
那这个妒忌通常是来自于我们的欲望跟缺乏的安全感。
In Saul's case, what the desire was for his reputation and for his kingship.
而在扫罗的例子，他的欲望就是他对于他的王位。
We studied this in previous chapters where Saul committed sins in offering an illegal offering and not in disobeying Samuel in deference for his people for his soldiers.
那我们在过去也曾经查考过扫罗，他因为了保住他的王位，他跨越了他献祭，因为要稳定民心。
And in his insecurity, when the women praised David over Saul, it ate at his insecurity and caused him to feel very threatened by David.
那缺乏的安全感，从扫罗的身上我们可以看到，当妇女歌颂大卫的时候，他受到了威胁。
And as a result, it led Saul to be angry, very threatened, scared, and anxious.
使他产生了愤怒，产生了恐惧，产生了忧虑。
And it removed any peace from his heart and made him become very irrational.
而这些东西使他心里面没有了平安，使他在选择上面不理智。
And like Saul, eventually it wears down on us. It wears us down.
所以我们可以看到说，这些是会夺取人的平安，会使一个人给腐烂掉。
So I would like to give you a personal example.
那所以我想给大家一些例子。
So at work, I've been asking my manager for a promotion.
所以在工作上呢，我跟我的主管要求我要升级。
However, my manager has always been telling me that I'm not ready.
但是我的主管告诉我说，我还没有预备好要来做新的岗位。
So earlier this year, I found out that some of my coworkers received promotions above me.
那在年初的时候，我就发现说，我有一些同事他们被升级了。
What upsetted me was that we were hired around the same time, and they started at a lower position than me.
那让我比较不高兴的是，他们进公司的时间的经历跟我一样的长，而他们进来的职位也比我低。
So, just like Saul, I became very angry, felt very upset, and very threatened.
所以呢，所以当我得知之后呢，我就像扫罗，我非常的愤怒，心里也感觉到受到了这个有恐惧，然后也受到了受到了逼迫。
So I lost a lot of peace. I became very angry, and my mind just became just obsessed with this, and it became very irrational.
所以我全心全注，我就很愤怒，很不理智，然后带着一个很妒忌的心。
So I spoke to my managers asking to see how I can to demonstrate that I'm ready for a promotion, and so I asked for more responsibilities.
所以我就跟我的主管谈说，那要怎么样去证明说我已经预备好 被升级，接受下一个岗位，那我就要求更多的在工作上更多的责任。
So my hope was to get a very nice project and to demonstrate my abilities.
所以我真的很希望说，我可以得到一个比较好、比较被看重的 project， 所以来展现我的能力。
But instead, my managers gave me 2 small projects that really doesn't really amount to much.
反而我的主管给我2个比较小的 project， 在公司里面比较不被看重的。
It was additional work with no additional recognition.
所以呢，换句话说，那就是更多的工，可是这些工却不会被人家看重。
So the result was that now I have more work and doing some of the works that I really do not like doing and projects that I really don't care to do.
所以跟我主管谈完的结果就是说，我现在需要做更多的工，而这些工是我一开始就不想做的，那所做的工也不会被人家得到认可。
So when I think back about this, my conclusion is it was better if I just didn't say anything at all.
所以当我回头再看的时候呢，似乎好像我不开口跟我主管主管要求是比我跟主管要求还要来得更好。
I was much happier before than after.
我之前没有开口，跟我现在比起来，之前没有开口，我还更开心。
And I think that's how jealousy affects us. It just ruins us. It ruins our peace, such that it's worse after than when you were before.
所以嫉妒真的会使我们变得比较不开心，心里面比较没有平安。
The question is, how do we avoid jealousy?
所以问题是说，我们要怎么样避免有一颗妒忌的心？
So, when looking at this, I can think of at least two ways I can share with you.
所以我经过这些事情，我想了，然后我在这里有2个方法，我可以跟大家分享。
First is a short-term solution, and second is a longer-term solution.
有一个是一个比较短暂的方式，一个是比较长远的这个目标。
So the first short-term solution is to be more objective in our thinking.
那这个短暂的，就是在我们的看法上面比较objective
To be realistic.
我们要比较实在。
So when we when we looked at the praises from the women,
就像当我们在看这些妇女来歌颂大卫的时候，
Saul could see that Saul could reacted in 2 ways.
扫罗有选择可以这样子的反应。
The way he reacted was he became very threatened by what the woman was saying.
那扫罗的反应是说他很愤怒。
Because he just saw that how much more they praised David versus him.
因为他所看到的是他们赞美大卫胜过于赞美他。
Or Saul could have taken a step back.
但是扫罗他也可以趁机会退让一步
and looked at it more objectively.
那从那个角度去看
And which is to say, well, even if David killed more men during this battle, why? Well, maybe David was younger, Saul was older.
那从那个角度去看，扫罗或许可以想说，那为什么大卫在战场上杀的敌人比他杀的多？那或许因为大卫他本身比较年轻，体力比较好。
Or it could be that, well, David was more of a soldier, Saul was more of a leader.
那或许扫罗可以想说，他的这个大卫的恩赐是在战场上展现他的武力，而扫罗的恩赐或许是在后面管理这个军事。
And the area where David was fighting could have had where the fighting was more fierce, and as a result, he could have had more opportunities to defeat the Philistines versus Saul.
那或许大卫他所参与的战场比较激烈，所以他有机会去立更多的功。
Or Saul could have thought, like we mentioned before, a longer term. Saul had a longer career and had defeated more enemies than David.
那这个长远的计划就是，或许扫罗可以看说， 扫罗可以看说整个职业生涯他的贡献。
And there, you can by looking at that longer term, you can see that, well, yes, maybe at this particular one moment, David was more successful than Saul, but Saul can look at it and says, well, over the term of my career as the king of Israel, I was also very victorious in battle, and I have nothing to fear from David.
那扫罗或许如果从那个长远的计划，他可以说没错，或许在这一场征战里面，大卫贡献的比较多，但是对于整个职业生涯来说，那扫罗在军事上的贡献，对于以色列国也是不少的。
So he could have used that mindset to look at how to reduce that anger, to reduce that anxiety, that fear that he had.
所以如果有这样的心态的话，那扫罗可以减低他的妒忌，也可以减低他的这个忧虑。
And so, like, say for me, when I looked at myself at work, I could have looked at my coworkers as saying, well, they had more opportunities with their projects.
所以在我的立场来说，我或许可以看说，我的同事们他们有更多的机会去接触更多的 project。
So, however, the work that I have done with my project is also very valuable and is producing good results.
但是我对公司的贡献也是有相当的影响力。
And maybe our position, our title in the company is not a very accurate reflection of what our abilities are.
所以或许我们的在公司里面的抬头未必真正反映出我们的能力。
So we can look at it, and through that way, we can do a short-term opportunity to take a step back and calm ourselves down.
所以或许这个就是短暂的方法，我们可以让一步，然后呢，去把我们自己的心给安静下
And
来。
then we can avoid acting irrationally.
所以这样子会避免我们有不理智的这个决定跟行为。
However, but for a longer term, for a longer term, it requires us to change our values.
但是对于这个长远来说呢，其实这也是给我们一个机会，让我们去调整我们的价值观。
As we mentioned earlier, jealousy comes from desire.
因为我们刚才有谈到说，这个妒忌是来自于我们自己我们自己的欲望。
And it's not just any desire, but desire for secular things.
那这个欲望是属世的。
So in Saul's case, is a desire for reputation and status.
那扫罗的欲望是他要得到这个名利。
So here, when we look at that Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30, a sound heart is life to the body.
所以刚才我们看这个箴言第14章第30节，这里说心中安静是肉体的生命。
So to obtain that sound heart, we need to give up the desire for secular things. We need to pursue better things.
所以如果我们想要得到心中安静，那我们不能去追求这些属世的东西。
So let's take a look at an example that Paul gave us.
那就像保罗所给我们的例子。
So let's turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 12.
我们来看哥林多前书的第12章。
1 Corinthians chapter 12.
哥林多前书第12章。
Let's read verse 28 to 30.
从第20节。
28.
第28节到第30节。
verse 28 to 30.
哥林多前书第12章第28节到30节。
Okay. And God has appointed these in the church: first apostles, second prophets, third teachers. After that, miracles, then gifts of healing, helps, administrations, varieties of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Are all workers of miracles? Do all have gifts of healing? Do all speak with tongues? Do all interpret? But earnestly desire the best gifts, and yet I will show you a more excellent way. So Paul in the Corinthian church had many problems.
在哥林多教会里面呢，教会有很多的问题。
And one of the main problems that was the church was very divided.
那其中一个问题就是教会不统一，非常的分裂。
And this division became one of the causes of this division was a jealousy among the members.
那分裂的原因是因为在信徒当中，他们彼此产生有了妒忌的心。
If you read the whole chapter 12, it talks about how members were constantly trying to obtain spiritual gifts.
那如果我们读第12章的话，我们就会发现说，这更多教会里面的信徒，他们有很多属灵的恩赐。
Well, this sounds really good, but they were beginning to start comparing these gifts among each other.
虽然这些属灵的恩赐很好，但是更多教会的信徒，他们开始来比较哪一个恩赐比较高、比较重要。
They would say, "Oh, well, you have the gift of healing. Well, no, I think the gift of interpretation is better."
有些人会有这个医治的恩赐，但是有些人或许会说，那这个有别的恩赐会更好。
Well, I have the gift of evangelism, which is even better because I can increase the membership in the church.
那或许有些人会说，那我有宣道的恩赐，那我可以把这个教会的人数增加，是因为我的恩赐。
But in reality, what they were comparing was they were trying to jockey for a position in the church.
但是如果我们仔细来看的话，到头来他们要的就是在教会里面的地位。
They were trying to use their spiritual gifts to tell others, to communicate to others that I am in a higher status than you.
他们用神给他们的恩赐来彼此的比较，说谁比较重要。
So Paul wrote to them told them that yes, these spiritual gifts are good, but it is not the best.
所以保罗就写信劝勉他们说，这些恩赐是好的。
And so the last the last few words, the last sentence in that verse, and yet I show you a more excellent way.
但是保罗同样劝勉他们说，要给他们指明一个最妙的道路。
And for them telling them this is what you need to pursue.
而他们所要用这些恩赐所追求是什么？
So let's look at what was this more excellent way.
所以我们来看这个保罗告诉他们是这条妙的道路。
Let's continue reading, starting at chapter 13, verse 1.
那我们来看第13章的第1节。
As you recall, the book of 1 Corinthians is actually one whole letter.
所以哥林多前书它是完全的一个书信。
So the chapters and verses was something that that man entered into Paul's letters to help us break down the letter so it's easier to read and to organize.
所以这个原本是一个完全全部都是书信，而我们事后加了第几章第几节，是帮助我们来这个读这个书信。
So while this verse section starts a new chapter, in actuality, it is a continuation of the previous chapter.
虽然是例如说从第13章第1节好像是新的一章，但是它原本的书信里面，它跟之前的这一段是连在一起的。
So let's start reading chapter 13, verse 1 to see what was Paul's more excellent way.
所以我们来看第13章第1节，这里保罗指的他们是什么道路？
So verse 1, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels, but not have love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. Verse 2,
第2节，
and though I have the gift of prophecy and understanding all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so I could remove mountains, but not have love, I am nothing. Verse 3,
第3节，
and though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not love, it profits me nothing. So here Paul has struck down the arguments of the Corinthians.
所以在这里保罗就把这个哥林多教会的这些纷争给说明了。
All the things that he told the Corinthians, that all the things that you have pursued is nothing.
说你们所追求的其实是没有价值，是没有意义的。
It is what matters is not your spiritual gifts, but is your character, the love that you have.
那重要的不是说你们身上有的恩赐，而是你们本身内心里面你们是否有爱。
And then Paul goes on to describe what love is.
那事后保罗才继续解释什么是爱。
And one of the characters of love is that love does not envy.
那其中一个爱的特质，一个表现就是爱是不嫉妒的。
The love will make you concerned more about others than your own well-being.
那爱是顾虑到别人而不追求自己的益处。
Love will make you seek others, seek the benefits of others rather than your own.
那爱是去追求别人的益处，而不是为自己追求益处。
So what Paul is actually telling the Corinthians here is that what matters the most is not the gifts and the physical and secular items, but it's actually what's these tangible things but what rather is the intangible, your character, who you are on the inside.
所以保罗在这里提醒哥林多教会的信徒说，追求的不是所看得见的恩赐，而是这些看不见，是个人的一些品格。
So at the end of chapter 13, in verse 13, Paul gave them 3 things that they can pursue.
所以呢，在这个哥林多前书第13章的最后一节、第13节那边，保罗给哥林多教会的信徒
So that once
3个东西，他们可以去
So
追
once
求
you。remove everything, all the secular items, there are 3 things that you can pursue.
所以，当你把这些属世的东西给移除掉之后呢，你有3个东西可以追求。
In verse 13,
第13节，
now abide faith, hope, love, these 3, but the greatest of these is love.
第13节，如今常存在的有信、有望、有爱，这3样，其中最大的是爱。
So Paul is telling, if you wish to pursue something, pursue after these 3 things: faith, hope, and love.
所以在这里，保罗鼓励、勉励哥林多教会信徒说，要追求的话，那你去追求有信、有望、有爱。
So when we look at this, if we pursue after worldly things, we end up with a lot of jealousy.
所以，当我们去回想，如果我们去追求属世的，那到头来我们所得到的，是带着很多的妒忌。
And then all the horrible things that come along with jealousy.
那还有这些跟妒忌所带来对我们的影响。
But if you pursue after the spiritual matters, the intangibles, faith, hope, and love, what you will be led to better things. You will be walking on the more excellent way.
但是如果我们追求的是信望爱，那我们就是在这个我们走的就是这条这个奇妙的道路。
So in conclusion, we see that jealousy is a very horrible thing.
所以我们可以看到说，妒忌是一件很不好的事情。
It is a vicious monster that eats up all our peace and destroys our relationships.
它是一个很凶猛的，很像一个野兽，会破坏我们跟人之间的关系。
Jealousy comes from a desire it comes from our secular desires.
是来自于我们属世的一个欲望。
But God has provided us a way to escape jealousy.
但是神在圣经上里面也教导我们要怎么样去避免有一个妒忌的心，
And that is to pursue after spiritual character.
那就是去追求一些是一些属天上的一些品格，
And that is to pursue after faith, hope, and love.
那就是去追求信望还有爱。
These spiritual characters will give us a sound heart.
这些会使我们心中去追求这些东西，会使我们心中安静。
And as in Proverbs, will provide us a life for our body, our soul.
这样子可以使我们的肉体有得到生命。
So let's not pursue after this world, but let's pursue after our spiritual growth and in faith, hope, and love.
所以我们不要去追求属世的，而反而去追求信望爱，使我们的灵性有办法成长。
So that concludes today's at this afternoon's sermon. Let's sing hymn 318.
所以我们结束下午的聚会，我们来唱诗318首。
Sing hymn 318.
唱诗318首。